Hey guys, so I realized actually that we're really behind on vocab. Um, Today, if we were still in school, we'd actually be on word 144. So I'm gonna do like a marathon of vocab words with you guys. So take out your vocab journals. I'll make a video tomorrow for DGP. And yeah, so okay, word 121 is oblivious when you're not aware or concerned about something that's happening around you. So, for example, let's say that you've got your headphones on and you're reading a book, and meanwhile there's like a fire or something up the street and around the block or whatever. Hopefully, a controlled fire, small little thing, not something that where somebody would get hurt or anything. But you would be oblivious to everything that's going around. So, like in that sentence, the dad was oblivious to his son's poor grades and did not intervene. So, probably the dad didn't have access to power school. The dad maybe worked all the time and just was not aware of the child's poor grades. Number 122 is obsequious, which is being like obedient or attentive to an excessive or servile degree. Basically, people who are obsequious want to please the person that they're being obsequious to, whether it's their parents or their boss. I know, like when I first started teaching, I was pretty obsequious with my principal at the time because I wanted to keep my job. And potentially he could have been like, okay, thank you for your service, but you can go find another place to work, which would be horrible in my opinion. That sentence, usually when I would do vocab like with my students in class, I would play a video from The Simpsons, which is supposed to be like a pun, but anyway. Number 123 here, officious. Like his officious demands were ridiculous. How will we ever find a VHS copy of Law and Order, which is, I think, a really popular show from like the 90s or the early 2000s. But sometimes, your teachers could be very officious. They could, for example, like in math, like let's say on a test, I remember when I was in high school, I had a teacher who would say that your answers on a test had to be put into, like, you had to draw a little square around it. And if you didn't, you wouldn't receive credit. I remember one time there was a student who circled it instead of putting it into like a little square, and the teacher did not give him credit for it. It was pretty trivial, right? It was very petty too, because like, why would you not give the student a point just because they didn't put their answer in a box? Opulent, that's kind of an easy one. I think a lot of us know what opulent means. Last year I had a student who, like, during a Socratic seminar said, like, oh, I live in Del Rio, and I know, and then he pointed to another student. He was like, and I know you live in Del Rio too, and we live in really opulent houses, and we have such an easy life compared to like people who live in Southside. And the other student that he called out got so upset because I guess there's like a stigma, at Gregory and Modesto, about people who live in Del Rio, which I didn't know about, but there you go. Well, I guess they don't like to make it known or whatever. 125 is ostentatious, which is pretentious display. Like, if you ever saw the movie Miss Congeniality with Sandra Bullock, there's this one line where the one who ends up winning the Miss America crown or whatever says that she couldn't light her batons on fire during her performance because her parents didn't like anything ostentatious, which in that case, it wouldn't necessarily be vulgar. It would just be like a designed to impress or attract notice. Sometimes people will buy, really like flashy cars that are intended to impress other people by saying like, oh, look, I bought this, like, I don't know, Ferrari or Lamborghini or something. Look at how much money I have. Number 126 is an easy one. It's like a mime. So there's obviously no synonyms for this one. And a lot of people are afraid of mimes and pantomimes and clowns, but to me, clowns are so funny. And I don't know why. Like, I don't know why people are afraid of clowns. Maybe it's because of that like subculture of the clowns, murdering people. There was a few years ago where there was like a trend. People would be dressing up in, all of these like clown uniforms, not uniforms, like clown costumes, and they would be like terrorizing neighborhoods. I remember, I think it was like 2017, right outside my house here, there was a guy who just like would walk around with a clown mask, and I hope it was like a fake knife, but it was a little scary. 127, pariah as a social outcast. And in that sentence, if you guys remember a few years ago, Mariah Carey was supposed to be performing on like CNN's New Year's Eve program or whatever. And she actually forgot the lyrics to one of her own songs. It was really kind of like cringy to watch. It was just like, how do you forget the song or the lyrics of your own song? It's so unheard of. It's so unprofessional, really. And so ever since then, she was known as Pariah Carey, which is kind of mean to Mariah Carey. But I mean, does she deserve it? I don't know. When we talk about pedestrian, it's not like a person who like walks, right? Like we're known. When you say that something's pedestrian, you're saying that it's pretty dull, and it's actually kind of insulting, really, if you think about it. Like in that sentence, the pedestrian presentation purposely pointed out proper parenthetical citation. So if you're going to be giving an entire presentation on parenthetical citation, I mean, I would be, enthralled by the mechanics of it all, but probably not everyone else. Everyone else would probably be bored to tears. I think persuasive is an easy one, and I probably just threw it out there just kind of like as an easy word as opposed to obsequious or something. But that's good at persuading someone. Next year, when you take AP Lang, or senior year, if you end up taking ERWC, going that route, you'll learn all about persuasive writing and about the art of persuasion. That's why, like right now, we're going to be focusing on Animal Farm, and we're going to be focusing on persuasion and argumentation and all of that. Here's 130, poignant. That's evoking a keen sense of sadness. So, like, for example, there have been times, mostly in 7th period, I think, where, like, I'll talk about my dad, and, like, after I finish, telling my poignant story or whatever, like, there's, like, this blanket of sadness, which, I mean, is a normal human emotion, but I think, like, with my dad anyway, talking about it is probably, like, a coping mechanism. Even though it's been almost 10 years, it'll be 10 years in this coming January, I think it's still important to talk about. Portentous is like a portent, and I gave you like a little definition of what a portent is, which is a sign that something bad is going to happen. So a lot of people will associate like a raven's cry to be portentous of bad news or bad luck or something. A lot of people who are superstitious, like for example, will like pray before their flight leaves, or maybe they will like brace themselves before they get on the freeway or something. And if they don't do it, then it could be maybe a little portentous as well. Okay, got 12 more. Jesus. Precocious. So you guys may have been a little precocious when you were kids. There's this one tweet. Let me pull it up really quick because it was pretentious, number one, but it was talking about a child who was precocious. And I actually have it bookmarked because I'm weird and I bookmark tweets sometimes, even though there are some people who said that bookmarking tweets is weird. But this dude said, "My wife and I never baby talk to our kids. We use full sentences and a wide vocabulary, including complex words. My son is 3 and can carry a full conversation. Adults at family gatherings are shocked at his social aptitude. My daughter isn't even 2, and she uses 4-syllable words." So, both of these kids are probably just a little precocious, assuming that it's true because, like, I like to read at the replies and everything. And one of them that I thought was really funny was, "Which 4 syllables does your daughter most often use?" And one of them is, "I've pooped myself, I must admit, reluctantly. Papa, your viral tweet seems fabricated, which in my opinion is probably what it was. Um, and like, anyway, that's just annoying. Oh, this is something nobody ever does, and that's procrastinate. But I feel like with school anyway, like procrastination isn't really a thing anymore because we don't have like a set schedule. We don't have we have deadlines, but if you don't follow the deadlines, I mean, it really happens. Um, Profound is very great or intense. So going back to like the stories about my dad, when I said that there was like a blanket of sadness, it was like a very profound um, sadness. But you know, somebody could also be profoundly proud of the achievements that somebody has made. Um, for example, the marathon I think was scheduled to be like at the end of March, and I was actually riding my bike in the park, and I think it was a Monday, and I saw a former student. He's a senior, and then I saw his girlfriend, and she said that he was running the marathon, and I thought that that was so profound that even though like your marathon, your scheduled marathon was canceled, like the fact that he trained and still ran the marathon, I thought was really really impressive. Um, Not that I, you know, run marathons. Jeez, somebody just flew by my street. Oh, who do I contact about getting some speed bumps around here? Okay, Preventer. That one's really archaic, actually. It's animal fodder, and sometimes they'll, you know, use it along with food. And in that sense, is she served the preventer with with a side of fava beans and a nice Chianti. That's a reference to the movie Silence of the Lambs with I think Anthony Hopkins, and like it is like one of the most iconic scenes in cinematic history. You should look it up. Pretty it's a pretty good movie. Provocative is causing annoyance, anger, or another strong reaction, especially deliberately. So sometimes teenagers in particular obviously like to push buttons, right? And they like to, you know, say things that could be considered like double entendres or that could be considered provocative. Um, my nephew, for example, he's going to be 13 tomorrow, actually, and he has been. Hey, leave that. Sorry, my dog. Shh, get your toy. Get it. Get your toy. Come on. Sorry, my dog eats bees, and I don't want her to do that anymore. Oh, buddy. Here. Get your toy. Good girl. Anyway, so my nephew likes to say some things that are provocative, which obviously I'm not going to repeat right now or ever because they're just. And he also games a lot. He used to play Fortnite, but he plays a lot of games on his Xbox, I think. I don't know. You guys probably know what games he plays on Xbox, but I don't. Prudent is acting with or showing care and thought and maybe like also consideration for the future. So like right here, it would not be prudent to not study until the day before finals. I was talking to a former student before school closed, and he got a 1 on the hug test. And it was funny because I asked him, like, why did you get a 1? And he was like, oh, you know, I paid for the test and I didn't, you know, I studied all night the night before the test so that I could get a 1. Probably not the best idea. Again, kind of tying it back to procrastinating, it's not probably very prudent to procrastinate on some things. There are some things that you could probably get away with procrastinating more than others. Studying for an AP test, probably not one of those things. Puissant is having great power or influence, or like in that sentence, you know, Lady Macbeth's puissant control was greater than Macbeth's will to live. And there's, you know, a little will to live joke, like so many of us. Alrighty, what are we at here? Pulverize. I really like my food processor because I make it's a Parmesan chicken. It's not chicken Parmesan. It's a cutlet, and I have to pulverize the Parmesan really, really, really finely. So I leave it in my food processor actually for about 3 or 4 minutes on high. That way the Parmesan gets into these tiny little sand-like particles. And I just realized that I used that sentence. I didn't even look at it before I started saying that story. Recant is to say that one no longer holds an opinion or a belief, especially one to be heretical. So, like, let's say that you have somebody who is an atheist. Atheists, if you're religious anyway, and if it's maybe more historically, could be considered heretical. And so, let's say that this person decides to convert to Christianity. Then they would recant their atheistic beliefs. They would, say that they no longer believe that there is, no God, and that they are now followers of like Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism or any of the other, hundreds of religions that we have as people. Okay, rectify. That is to to make something right or correct. Like in that one, I will rectify my poor behavior by not saying sorry without meaning it. And I feel like a lot of people sometimes will say sorry, but they won't change their behavior. And so, in my opinion, when you apologize, when you say sorry, and you don't change your behavior, then it's so insincere and, dare I say, even worthless? I don't know. Your parents probably say something similar to you. Like, let's say they're like, hey, you need to clean your room. And you're like, oh, sorry, I'll get to it. And then you don't. And then the next day they're like, hey, I told you to clean your room. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I was going to, but I forgot. And then you don't again. Like that sorry ends up being kind of meaningless. Okay, let's go two more. Let's go to redress, which is to set correct of an unfair situation, though. I know that sounds a lot like rectify. This one is to set something right, but this one is to remedy or set right of an undesirable or an unfair situation. So, for example, let's say that your math teacher gives you a test, and let's say there's 30 students, and let's say 29 of them ended up getting an F, and one of them ended up getting an A. I've heard that there could be like some teachers who are like, well, I didn't do anything wrong because one person got an A, so that means that I did my job teaching. But if they wanted to redress the situation, they could potentially say, you know what, maybe I could have approached, the lesson, the activity a different way. Anyway, last one, remonstrance. Bananas. I was supposed to get a haircut like 2 weeks ago. Oh, this is terrible. A forcefully reproachful protest. So here, let's say that in my class, say we were still in the classroom, students all, let's say the day of the annotations were supposed to be due, they wanted to hold a remonstrance and like walk out of class. And as they are doing so, let's say that they would be throwing their books in the garbage. I don't know. I think that would be a good example of remonstrance, but look at that. We did it. We did about 2.5 weeks worth of vocab in I don't know how long, but DGP coming soon. And I think every week I'm going to post these, vocab videos, and I'll just hammer out all of the vocab for the week. That way you guys' vocabulary improves. When you do your assignments and everything, even if it's not for my class, let's say it's for Euro or world history, like go back and use these words. The more practice that you have with them, the higher elevated vocabulary you're going to have, and then the better off you're going to be when you go to college, or when you start your careers. But anyway, okay, I'll see you guys next time.